it's Pete here, and today I wanted to talk about psyching in bridge. So this is a little bit of a sensitive topic because most people have a really bad reaction when their opponents actually psych against them. And I want to go through the pros and cons of it, when it should work, how it works, and how you can actually defend against it. So before we get started, what is a psych? So a psych is a gross misrepresentation of your hand. And in bridge, you can purposely lie about your hand if you want to. You have to know what you're showing. You have to explain to your opponents what you are trying to show. But that doesn't mean you have to have that in your hand. You can have anything you want. So, for instance, you might be lying about 4 points or lying about the length of the suit by multiple cards. This is a psych isn't like a small lie. Like if you're a point or two out, or if your shape is slightly off, that's not a gross misrepresentation. That's just using some judgment, or that's fine. That's not a psych. A psych is when you are grossly misrepresenting your hand, basically attempting to lie to your opponents. But you're also lying to your partner. So that's what a psych is. And now I just want to talk a little bit about the culture of psyching, which is most people have a really negative reaction when the opponents psych against them because they feel cheated. They feel like it wasn't an honest game of bridge. But I think this is an important part of bridge, but it should be very rare. You don't want to see people psyching all the time. And there's actually laws against that as well. But it is useful to know that your opponents can psych and might occasionally psych. It adds like an extra element to the game, makes you think outside the box, or it challenges you that little bit extra knowing that that option is available. And it's kind of like bluffing in poker. So imagine how boring poker would be if you couldn't bluff in it. Now, psyching in bridge should be a lot less than poker, and we're not trying to turn our game into poker. But it is important that this bluffing element is actually involved in bridge. So with psyching, it should be rare, but you should be able to do it. So they're important things, and if it happens against you, you shouldn't actually get upset. If it's a good psych and it catches you out, then well done to your opponents, making it well timed. But it's important to know that they do it and being able to defend against it. So next I wanted to talk a little bit about when would it be good to psych. And just giving you numbers like how often it happens. I don't think I've psyched this year, but if you do, it's like 1 in a couple of thousand hands that you might actually psych. So it's a really rare element. You don't want to be doing it too much. Whereas those small lies where you change a point here or there, or a card length here or there, they're fine. They happen. I do that quite a lot, using judgment because I want to upgrade a hand or things like that. But grossly misrepresenting your hand, that happens quite rarely. Some people do it more than others, but in general, should be very rare. So let's now talk about the risk versus reward. So bridge is all about risk versus reward, and psyching is the riskiest thing that you can actually do because you are blatantly lying not only to your opponents, but also to your partner. So things can go well out of hand if you psych at the wrong time. So what you try and do, if you are trying to psych successfully, is work out when you can actually minimize your risk of psyching. But that being said, there are laws against controlled psychs. You can't use conventions where you know what the answer is going to be and that will safely protect you, where there's no chance of anything going haywire. But you can limit the damage. You can choose when you can do things that won't go too badly for you. So psyching is all about minimizing the risk while hopefully having some good reward. So let's jump in and look at some examples of this. So let's say our partner opens 1 heart, and we've got this hand with 5 card support and a very weak hand, and our right hand opponent doubles. Now the normal sort of bid on this hand would just be jumping to 4 hearts. But if you're thinking outside the box and you're trying to psych, what you could consider is doing something like one spade. So let's look at the risk versus reward of this. The reward, the opponents don't bid 4 spades over our eventual heart contract, and we talk them out of playing the right game. If they do declare the hand, they're going to miscount points and shape of it, and they'll be quite confused. It'll take some time to discover what's actually going on. What is the risk here? Well, partner could easily have spades. I can't correct this back to hearts at any level. My partner might be the one with a really strong hand and might be bidding 4 spades, and then I could get ourselves into a lot of trouble there. But that risk is it's lowered a fair bit because East doubled. So we've got a big heart fit, so I know I can always return to hearts at whatever level. But if, like, my partner could keep bidding spades. They don't know that I bid 1 spade on shortages. So there is risk here, but the reward is actually pretty good. We might be able to play hearts at whatever level we feel comfortable. We might not want to play 4 hearts on this hand, but 4 hearts is the normal bid in that it's preemptive, and either their side's making 4 spades or our side's making 4 hearts a lot of the time. But if I bid 1 spade, then it sort of talks them out of it. This is basically what was known as a baby psych. This is like what used to be in the old days more common. I haven't seen it happen in a long time, but this is a psych that you can do rarely. You don't want to do it too often. I'll talk more about the laws around psychs, but this is an approach where you're thinking about the risk versus the reward. And here we're not vulnerable, so the risk is lowered. We've got a heart fit, so even if my partner raises to 2 spades, I could then convert to 3 hearts potentially, but I might have to pass because if my partner bids 2 spades and I bid 3 hearts, that might be a game try, and then they'll bid 3 spades. And if I bid 4 hearts, they might be confused and still bid 4 spades because they don't know what's going on, and they think a 4-4 fit will be better than a 5-3 fit. So things can go wrong in which I might just have to pass spades and take whatever negative I get. So there are definite risks involved with this, but the reward is trying to talk the opponents out of bidding their spade suit. Let's look at another potential one that you could do and the risk versus reward of this. So let's say that it goes pass to us, and we've got this 10 high card points with a 7 card club suit. So here, a couple of bids you could consider. Firstly, you might open this 1 club. You might open it 3 clubs. It's pretty good for a 3 club bid, but our partner's a passed hand, so you might make it a bit wider ranging preempt in that case. 1 club would be the normal bid here, but there are some other options. If you did want to psych and you wanted to do gross misrepresentation of your hand, let's look at the risk versus reward. So firstly, we're favorable vulnerability. This is this definitely lowers the risk. So people psych more often when they are favorable vulnerable because the chance of being penalized and going for a very large number is reduced. So be aware that people are more likely to psych when they're favorable. Again, psyching, very rare thing, but it's important to understand the reasoning behind it and what they're trying to achieve. So third seat favorable is like the most risk, like low risk time to actually be psyching, because firstly your partner doesn't have a lot of points, so it's pretty limited on what they'll do. They won't be bidding game that often if you open light. The reward here is you might be able to talk the opponents out of game. So if I open 1 club or 3 clubs, I'm not going to talk West out of bidding very often. But one bid that might talk them out of it is, let's say, opening 1 no trump, 15 to 17 balanced. I obviously don't have this in my hand, but let's see what the risk versus reward of this actually is. So the risk is partner transfers to spades, partner transfers to hearts, partner bids game. All of these are higher risk. But there's a chance that if partner bids 3 no trumps, that we might make. So it might go 3 no trumps. Now, while I don't have 15 to 17 points, I do have a source of tricks, and the game might make on this hand. So one of the risks was partner bidding game, but if they choose to bid no trumps, then that's fine. Like, we may make some of the time. Obviously, it wouldn't be that good very often, but it could work. But what one no trump tends to do is it's very hard for your opponents to bid game after you open a strong no trump. It can be done, but most people really angle for part scores. So here, the reward here is I'm trying to talk my opponents out of bidding 4 hearts or 4 spades. It won't always work, but it could happen. So this would be another potential bid that you could try and do. And again, just looking at the risk versus reward of what's actually happening here. Again, I'm not suggesting that you should open one no trump in all of these cases. I'm not suggesting you should do all of these psychs very often, just discussing some of the potential psychs that you can do and looking at the risk versus reward of them. Okay, next let's look at what I consider a bad psych because it's high risk, high reward rather than low risk, medium reward. For me, I'm conservative with my psychs and I don't like going for like 2,000 when things go really badly. But this is one of the first psychs that people envisage as it goes past them. Third seat, they might go, oh, I'll open my short major. I'll open 1 spade. This will tend to go very badly for you because almost all the time partner will have a fit for you and you'll be playing 2 spades, 3 spades or 4 spades. So your partner will be raising spades here and you'll be playing in this bad fit. You might not always get doubled, but you will get doubled some of the time. So basically, our risk here is we are almost certainly going to be playing spades and we are going to be going down a significant amount. So I might be going down 3 nearly all the time, if not more. So partner will very often raise when you open like a singleton major. I think this is one of the worst psychs available, but people often think about doing it because they think, oh, I can talk my opponents out of playing spades, which is true. But sometimes they play 3 no trumps, which will also make, which partner will then be leading a spade. So again, other things that are bad about this is the vulnerability. Psyching when vulnerable is a very dangerous thing. You want to like minimize your risk. So here, opening a singleton major with nowhere to run is quite a bad idea. Partner may bid 4 spades, which will then get doubled because someone will have a huge stack of spades. So just an example of what I would consider a bad psych, but you're fully welcome to try it and see how poorly it actually goes for you. And then finally, I wanted to highlight just one psych that happened against me. I was playing in the Ye Brothers Invitational a while back. So this is a high-level open invitational event where my opponent opened 1 no trump on a hand similar to this. They had a 6-card heart suit and 2 points. Now, the whole reasoning here, firstly, high risk, like not high risk, but first seat, your partner isn't past hand. Your partner could be doing anything, but the vulnerability was right. They were favorable, and the not vul versus vulnerable means the reward is quite high. So this is a medium to high risk bid, but the vulnerability was right, lowering the risk, but the reward was also great. When they've got 2 points, the chance of the opponents having a vulnerable game is really high. Anyway, the auction proceeded something like 2 spades and then 2 no trump 11 sol. And I was this player here, and I had a decent hand. I didn't have a fantastic hand. The points were relatively evenly split between me, my partner, and North. But because 2 no trumps was forcing, well, like 11 sol, it said please bid 3 clubs. I thought I'd find out more information, and then it went pass, and then now my partner doesn't know. Like my partner's realised North, the south hand has psyched here because I've passed a forcing bid, and I'll get more on exposing psychs. But they didn't know how many points I had versus how many points the North player had, and we defended 2 no trumps, and we beated about 4 tricks. But we didn't get value for our vulnerable game here. So another psych here that happened, which basically the plan here was open 1 no trump and probably pass what happened. But the hope is that your opponents intervene and don't actually know where to actually go from there. But things could go badly for this. It could go intervention. Your partner could then bid 3 no trumps, and this could get doubled very easily. So high risk, or at least medium risk, high reward for trying to cheat the opponents out of a vulnerable game. So those were just some different examples of psychs and looking at the risk versus reward of them. The next thing that often happens with psychs is exposing them. So if you psych, then you want to try and convey information to your partner to stop the auction going off the rails. There are a few different ways that this can actually happen. And the first one is passing forcing bids, which we just saw here, where it went 1 no trump, went an overcall, and then your partner bid 2 no trumps, which said bid 3 clubs. And if you pass that, you're not doing what your partner told you. So there's two options. Number one, you either forgot your system, or number two, you've chosen not to actually do it. So if you know your system, then you passing highlights that that it's exposing a psych, that you didn't actually have your original bid. Well, ideally how this option would pan out for South is if it went 2 hearts, transfer to spades, and then you pass that. And now West has a dilemma about what to actually do over this. So this would be an ideal way of making the auction really awkward for East-West, but also exposing the psych so that your partner doesn't continue to go off the rails and bid too high. So what you want to do if you do psych, if it looks like your partner is the one that's going to get themselves into trouble, is you want to reveal that you didn't have your initial bid. And this is quite difficult to do a lot of the time, which involves basically passing forcing bids, or also making non-systemic bids. There are times when you can make non-systemic bids. They're pretty rare. It's hard to come up with examples of it. Most often you'd expose a psych by passing a forcing bid, but this also has the risk of now highlighting to your opponents that your initial bid was a fabrication, which means that opens them up, and can they then find the contract that they wanted to actually get to? So very often they might double, but they have to guess what's going on with the other player as well. So it doesn't mean that the auction will stop in 2 hearts, but highlighting things like this will then allow the opponents to come back into the auction. So you have to then weigh up, do I want to reveal that I've psyched, or do I want to carry on through it and whatever consequences happen, no matter how high we play, we do it. So that was one example. Another example of exposing a psych, if I can get the initial boards back, so just give me a sec. Okay, this is the first example where it went 1 heart, double, and you could consider bidding something like 1 spade. Now the auction might pan out and go 2 spades, and it might go pass, pass, or probably won't pan out like this, but it might do something like this, where you then run to 3 hearts. Okay. This would also expose a psych. This would be a very strange auction where you found a spade fit, you got doubled there, and then you ran to a heart fit. Right? This would also highlight that you probably didn't have spades, because if you had a spade fit, why are you now running to a higher level to a different fit? So bidding 3 hearts here should also expose a psych here. So if you run to a known fit, that would also highlight that you might have been lying about your first bid and actually psyching. So there's 3 main ways that people expose psychs: passing forcing bids, making non-systemic bids, but they're quite difficult and it depends on how much agreements that you actually have, and then finally running to a known fit when the auction starts panning out poorly. So here 3 hearts should highlight that they don't actually have spades. So anyway, that's a lot about the risk versus the reward of psychs, and also how people sometimes expose psychs. So if you're the defenders here, you should be aware of what's going on when people are highlighting that they didn't actually have one of their original bids. So be aware of them, because it might alter how you want to proceed in the bidding, and you might realize that you have to catch up in the bidding and do some more bidding later. So the next thing is about laws of psychs that I wanted to talk about. There are laws regulating sort of how often you're allowed to psych, in that if you do it too often, it becomes a partnership agreement, and then your partner has to start alerting the opponents. Like that, if you did this enough that your partner would recognize that one spade here didn't promise spades, your partner would have to start alerting one spade to say it shows 4 or more spades, 6 or more points, but sometimes he's done it with short spades, right? So if you start doing the same psych often enough and repeated, that your partner, like if you've done it once, maybe twice, your partner doesn't know that it's going to happen very often. But if you've done it more regularly than that, and not nearly as rarely as what I was suggesting, then your partner has to start alerting it because it's a partnership agreement. And there might also be rules about brown sticker agreements of doing it too often. Like there's laws of protection about doing things too often. So if you psych, you can psych, but don't do the same psych very often. Mix it up if you want to. But doing it so repeatable that your partner then understands that it might be a psych and is aware of it, then becomes bad. So that's the main law about psychs. Another law about psychs is you can't psych your strongest bid. So for instance, if you're playing standard, you can't open 2 clubs game force as a psych. Like that, it's just barred. You're not allowed to do it. If you're playing precision, you can't open 1 club strong. Like you can't just completely grossly misrepresent it. Like if this was 16 plus points, you might be able to do it on a 13 count, which isn't a gross misrepresentation, but anything weaker than that would start being a gross misrepresentation. So you're not allowed to psych your strongest bid in your system. So there are a couple of laws about them. Remember that psychs should be rare. Don't do it too often with the same partner, because then it becomes a partnership agreement. Also, your partner's not allowed to assume that you've psyched until you've sort of exposed it, or it's become like the auctions become evident that you've psyched. Their assumption shouldn't be that you're psyching. They're not allowed to protect against the idea that you're psyching. It's meant to be a high risk for for everyone involved. So you're not allowed to do bids that are completely protected against psyching. And then finally, defending against psychs. This is a really difficult one, but if your opponents find a good psych, you should be happy about it. It's a rare bird, but it can be quite interesting as well. But defending against psychs, when the opponents expose the psych, then you have to do some guesswork. It's kind of a lot of guesswork about what you want to do. But if you understand why they're trying to psych, it's probably because it's your hand. It's also important to understand the risk versus reward of what they're trying to do and what sort of options they may be trying to cheat you out of, which might indicate how you should proceed from actually bidding there. So it's difficult, but it's an enjoyable sort of thing when it comes up. But it would be ruined if it happened too often, but you should enjoy it when it happens. You don't see it too often. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this lesson on Psyching in Bridge. Some examples that I covered, what it was, sort of culture around it, how people often see it as taboo. Most good players won't actually do it against weaker players that are sort of playing duplicates or lower sort of levels. Because they expect to sort of win. So usually it's a thing done between people of sort of equal standard play, with the idea being that it's a high risk reward sort of proposition. And if they're much better than you, then they probably don't need to risk it. So I've often been told that, like, when playing certain sessions, just don't do it. Like directors have told me like I'm entitled to do it, but it's sort of frowned upon. So the main thing about Psyching in Bridge is, like, there's a culture around it. It's often looked poorly upon. I don't think it should be, but don't do it against people that don't know how to defend against it or have never seen it, because they're there for some enjoyment in bridge. So, like, that they want to have fun. If you're much better than them, don't do it against them. That would be my recommendation. But do it against people of similar standard to you, or better standard. It can work against them as well, really, really well. But it should be quite a rare thing. Then we talked about risk versus reward, and then sort of how people expose psychs, the laws of psychs, and a few little tips about defending. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this lesson on psyching in bridge, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.